now it gets interesting. Oh, by the way, if I had my druthers, I would not have shared anything with you that we've covered so far. I would go to somewhere around slide number 70, and you'll see, and we'll get there. Because what this really is I'm trying to convince you as to what we need to do and why it's so difficult and how we got to where we are. That's what I'm trying to convince you. So someone might say, and you may say in the evaluations, well, Tom, we didn't need to hear all this stuff about our legislation and stuff, because we knew all this. You need to just get into how do we do integrated employment. And hey, I wish I could do that. I can't, because every one of you are coming from a different place. Some of you may already be there. Some of you are just starting to think, gee, we need to get our train on the track. So because my audiences are so diverse on most topics, it's sort of like Vince Lombardi. You ever heard of the guy? He was a football coach. And there's this famous tale that his team lost like 6 or 7 consecutive games. And he's really aggravated. And he takes the guys down at halftime into the locker room. And he said, sit down. He said, gentlemen, this is a football. And so I sort of feel like in many ways that's where we need to start. And if you're far in advance of that, no, I'm sorry. I mean, that's great. But here we go. California requirements. Oh, any questions, comments before we start? California requirements. So this is where it even gets better. So California is so good in this regard. The Employment First policy establishes the value of work fairly within the Lanterman Act, and we talked about that, right? And makes it the highest priority. And then this next thing down here, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities shall, quote, develop an informational brochure about the Employment First policy, translate the brochure into various languages, and post the brochure on its internet website. So all families should be well educated, you would think, as to the expectations of the DDS system as it relates to employment, you would think. I don't believe they are. I think what happens is that some service coordinators hand families, here's your brochure. And we sort of meet the letter of the law, but there's no spirit of saying, here, let's have a conversation how important it is for your son or daughter to be employed. I'm not sure whether that is happening. The Employment First Committee of the Council shall, quote, recommend goals for measuring employment participation and outcomes. And we're going to look at those outcomes here in a moment. For people within a developmental services system, and identify existing sources of data for identifying employment outcomes by age, gender, and all that data is available, by the way, ethnicity, type of disability, and geographic location. So if you're interested, go to their website, or if they haven't posted it as of late, go to the console. Regional centers, ready? Shall provide consumers 16 years of age or older, and when appropriate, their parents, legal guardians, conservators, or authorized representative with information in an understandable form about the Employment First policy, options for integrated competitive employment, and services and supports, including post-secondary, that are available to enable consumer to transition from school to work and to achieve outcomes of obtaining and maintaining integrated competitive employment. Integrated competitive employment is intended, again, all this is legislation, to be the first option considered by planning teams. Now, all of you, I am assuming, have been involved in the ISP, if that's what you call that, or IPP process. Do you feel, given your participation, that integrated competitive employment is coming across as the first option considered? Is that what you're experiencing? No. How much would it cost to change that? How much would it cost, Bertha?
Pass.
Anthony, how much would it cost to change it?
Nothing.
Nothing, thank you. Whose permission would the service coordinator need to change it?
No one's
Yeah. If they decided to change it, what policy would be violated?
probably none.
Okay. It's a decision we're making. We've decided, and you can't say we haven't, we have decided not to follow that as specified in law to make it the first option considered by the planning teams for working age individuals But individuals may choose goals other than integrated competitive employment. They can choose to go to college. They can choose a vocational track. There's other things that they can choose, but our priority, according to the legislation, must be competitive employment. That's pretty profound. See how excited I am in terms of many states don't have that, but we have this as this wonderful foundation and seem to turn our back on it. Post-secondary education, technical or vocational training programs, and internship programs may be considered as a means to achieve, achieve competitive integrated employment. So you're not going to school because you just want to go to school or an education is a good idea. You're doing it because that's going to get you into competitive employment or career advancement. The Department of Developmental Disabilities may request information from regional centers on current and planned activities related to the Employment First policy. And we will get to the stats in a moment. Now, this is really exciting too. So you not only have all this wonderful state legislation, we have a whole series of federal laws and regulations funded with billions of dollars with a B that have been in place for decades to help assure that people with disabilities become employed. So we got a great federal system and a great state system. We have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I'm not going to read it to you. We have the Developmental Disabilities Act of 1984, the Rehab Act amendments of 1986, and ADA, which is very significant because ADA, if you stop to think about it, is about accessibility. Keeping people and using public funds to segregate people in facility-based environments is in violation of ADA, as well as the Olmstead Act. The state has closed basically all of your state-operated developmental centers other than Porterville. You had like 7. Why did your state close those centers? Do you think it's because your state legislature is so compassionate and they wanted to enhance the quality of life? No, the DOJ was down their back saying that you are segregating people. Olmstead requires that people have normative lives and be fully integrated. Why are we closing the sheltered employment programs throughout the country? It's the Olmstead Act. Why are the regional centers trying to get people with developmental disabilities out of nursing homes? It's the Olmstead Act. So we have all this stuff going for us, and we don't seem to be taking advantage of it. I'm optimistic in that regard because we have all this, and there's a lot of money behind all this stuff too. The U.S. Department of Justice, DOA, has expanded their Olmstead and ADA enforcement in over 25 states in the last several years. DOJ agreements in Rhode Island, Oregon, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and Delaware have focused on the expansion of employment, supported employment, and community integration, pushing them to close down their sheltered employment programs and other segregated environments. Bottom line, the paradigm is shifting. You can either get on the bus or you will be under the bus. And my thought is, I don't just want you on the bus, I want you to be the bus driver. You need to decide where the bus is going. Because if you're just on the bus, you may not be happy with who's driving the bus, okay? Handwriting's on the wall. Washington State discontinued funding sheltered employment in 2008. I put that up there because this whole thing is not a new thing. I mean, we've been trying to move this thing forward for a long time. New Jersey stopped funding sheltered employment in 2014. A point I want to make, to the best of my knowledge, we can segregate people in employment settings and in facility-based day programs. You just can't use public monies to do it. If you want to go private pay and segregate them. And there are many sheltered employment programs that will continue throughout the country that are self-sustaining and or funded privately. You just can't use public taxpayer monies. Hey, what would people say? Hey, I'm going to set up this employment program over here, and I'm going to use tax monies, and this is where all the Latinos have to be employed. What would happen? You'd be in jail by the end of the day. This is where all Jews, we're going to put all Jews, I'm going to use the tax money to put all the Jews in here, and this is where they got to work. We're going to pay people to keep them there too. You'd be in jail by the end of the day. But see, we can do it for people, and we don't see it in that sense. We see the people we support as not as that they're Catholic or Jews or Armenians or African Americans. We shouldn't be treating any other group that way, and we'd be horrified if we did. But it's perfectly okay to do it to people with developmental disabilities. By definition, we must think it's perfectly okay. September 2011, the Federal Centers on Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, issued guidance which stated that Medicaid waiver funding may not be used for vocational services delivered in facility-based or sheltered work settings where individuals are supervised for the primary purpose of providing goods or service. Look how far back that goes, 2011. Yike. Workshops. Now, I have some challenges with this, as you might imagine. How do I feel about sheltered employment programs? Do I want people to work in a segregated environment? No. Do I want people fully integrated? Yes. Do I want to close a sheltered employment program where people are earning money, paying taxes, feeling productive, valuing their work, and having great relationships with many other people there? Do I want to close that sheltered employment program where people are now relegated to sit home, lonely and idle, with no productivity, not earning any money, and not paying any taxes? The issue is not about closing the sheltered employment program. The issue is about what opportunities I can provide people that are better than what I'm taking away from them. The radical inclusionists don't care. They don't care. What they want to do, they focus on what they want to eliminate, feeling no sense of responsibility on what they have to create. And it's not about sheltered employment programs. It's about the concept of segregated environments. It's true in public schools. Do I want special education classes where kids are segregated? No. But I don't want a kid with autism in a regular fourth grade class screaming and hollering, throwing crap all over the class, hitting his housemates, parents calling and saying, my child is afraid to come to school because this kid with autism is hitting him, calling the superintendent. When he's put in that class and we don't have paraprofessionals that are appropriately trained, there's not a special education resource teacher supporting the regular classroom teacher. We've made no environmental modifications. Keep him in the regular special education class. It's in his best interest and everybody's best interest. I don't want him there, but if that's what we're going to get, because now what are people thinking about him? I've destroyed his reputation. I have tarnished it even further. So everybody got the drift? So if your facility-based, traditional, classic day program, where people are putting pegs and boards and rings on sticks, if you're going to close it down, you better give people something better on what they got, or I will fully support you in keeping people to do nothing that is meaningful. Okay, everybody with me? If what we're going to do is just take them out in a community-based setting where they are going to be devalued, demeaned, and degraded because of a variety of conditions, let's keep them segregated where we can at least protect them from those kind of attitudes. Step back. I was, and this is what I just went through with you, employed. I was a taxpayer. I was productive. I was proud of my job. And then the radical inclusionists closed my sheltered workshop. Now I work for free and volunteer. Now, you may not realize, but the proponents of the closure of the sheltered workshop say, we can't fix the problem until we close the workshop. In other words, they feel the pressure of people being idle and not having anything to do will result in them getting employed. I mean, that's a great story. It just does not work that way. Because I can tell you there are thousands and thousands of people with developmental disabilities who are now doing nothing at all, who had been in sheltered employment programs. So the reality is it doesn't work that way. I work for free and volunteer, play games, go into the community. You know, these places do community exploration, like people are nomads in the community. We're going to explore the community. What is community exploration? You can't go to the community. The community is not a place. You can't find it. You can't locate it. You got to create it. You got to build it. The community is relationships and connections. That's what the community is. I mean, I find it interesting when we close the state institutions in the state. People were proclaiming they're moving to the community. And it was a lie. The vast majority of all those people that left Agnew's merely moved from one institution to another. The only difference is the one they moved into has fewer people than the one they just moved out of, because you can't blow it up and you can't close it down. Inevitable. The United States Department of Justice recently stated its belief that the Olmstead Act, boy, the problem is there's no Olmstead police. There's no Olmstead police. There's no ADA police. There's no one to enforce this stuff unless somebody files a complaint. And the complaint go in a queue. You know how big the queue is for ADA violations in Olmstead? They're going to get to it in 15 years. I mean, they have such limited ability to enforce it that there's little consequence to not following it. I mean, somebody says, well, gee, we're in violation of Olmstead. We can go outside on the street. There's a sign out there, honest, it says 35 miles per hour. Do you know if we stood out there for 5 minutes, you're going to see someone doing 55? Well, wait a minute, the sign says 35. There are people who will violate the laws, and we have a huge number of people violating the Olmstead and ADA laws as well as all the others. That placement in the sheltered workshop and similar facilities may be a violation of the Olmstead Act. It sure is. Self-advocates. Becoming Empowered, the acronym SABE, has specifically called for the closure of sheltered workshops. They state clearly and unequivocally, we have been prepared enough. Get us real jobs. Close sheltered workshops. Now, I want to go through some very specific logistics. These are at an administrative level, individual person level, programmatic level, of things that have to be considered when we transition people from facility-based environments to a community-based environment. And this is tough, by the way. Some of these things do not have easy answer, but every answer is based upon a person, not a group of people. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, it will. The following issues need to be carefully considered in the developing strategic plan for successfully transitioning from site-based programs to community integrated supports. How can public, and this is interesting, how can public transportation and or private transportation, family, friends, et cetera, be utilized, or if necessary, the current transportation program be reconfigured to meet the transportation needs in scattered community locations? It's one thing to have several vans go around picking up people in their home and bringing them all back to one facility-based site. Something very different when you have the 40 people who are there now going to 10 different locations all simultaneously. How are you going to make that happen? Well, number one is we need a Medicaid waiver system that will pay families to transport their family member to the employment site or volunteer site. Otherwise, we cannot have people, and what is commonly happening, you will see people in day supports all coming to a facility site, and then they take them out to these employment or volunteer locations. You do not, by the way, raise your hand. Are some of you doing that? You have people coming to, and don't be embarrassed, they're going to get rid of this stuff, okay? You have people coming to a facility-based site in the morning and then leaving and going out to employment sites or volunteer sites. Raise your hand if you're doing that. Only one of you? She said, sort of you. Okay, because that's, my experience is 90% of all places do that. And if we're going to eliminate the facility-based site, then you shouldn't have any people even coming to it. We don't even want a facility-based site. They need to go directly from their homes, wherever that may be, directly there. And in order to do that, we have to have a larger transportation system that will include families. The waiver system does currently allow to pay families. You can get like a, what is it called, a waiver or something, a disposition to pay families. We needed a standard practice so families can do that. Also, go online and you will see that Uber has just announced a whole new, any of you aware of it? Uber just announced a whole new program that allows Uber to get directions and payment from other than the person being transported if they have a disability. So Uber's getting very much into the transportation of people with disabilities. Please go online, Google that, and you will see their announcement. It was a major announcement just made last week by Uber, and you're going to see more and more of that. Because right now it's very difficult for you to schedule transportation for somebody else and for it to come to your cell phone and you to pay for it rather than they to pay for it. Everything's based upon who's traveling. So they modified that. So the transportation service, this is what's interesting, is that when I was working with Tierra del Sol, remember Tierra del Sol? They had contracted with me when they made a decision to close the campus to help in that transition. And what became obvious is the larger challenge in transitioning weren't the families. They weren't the people supported. It was the staff. And I missed it. We had staff coming to Tierra del Sol for 20 and 25 years, carpooling to get there. It's expensive to get to work. When you transition these programs, you can't carpool. You got it? You got to be insightful. You can't. We have had staff who form valued relationships with their coworkers. They go to work because they like working with these people. You're not going to work with those people anymore. It's done. I want to make sure you all understand the emotional aspects associated when you break up these facility-based kind of supports. It becomes something very, very different. Plus, the skill set of staff is very different. I now have to present myself in a very different way in a community setting than I do in a facility-based setting. My dress needs to be different. I now have to dress for that occasion, wherever I may be. You'll see staff coming into many facility-based environments doing nothing more than covering their bodies. I'm serious. And it may not be a big deal in that facility-based environment. We're in a community-based environment. Staff have to be in uniform. You gotta be in uniform. The uniform is the clothes that you need to wear that demonstrate to the people you support how they need to be dressed, whatever that may be. What mechanisms should be used to inform and educate families, support recipients, and other stakeholders of the transition? This is not something we just spring on people. That's why I like the ISP as part of the process. It becomes a communication, people have input into it, and we can have dates and timelines for that transition. How do we schedule and deploy direct support professionals to maximize the limited staff resources? This is huge. Boy, I'll tell you, and I don't have a lot of good answers for this. Let me give you a metaphor. I have 24 people in a traditional facility-based environment. My staff ratio is 1 to 3. How many staff do I have? 8. How in the world do I have a staff ratio of 1 to 3, stay with me, when I have a group of 3 people, 1 or 2 of whom are incontinent, 1 or 2 of them a man, another one a woman? How do I do that when one of them uses a wheelchair? Somebody want to raise their hand and tell me how you're going to do that? Do I take all 3 into a men's bathroom when the man has to go to the bathroom and take the women into a men's bathroom? Is that what you're going to do? Are you going to leave the 2 women outside unsupervised and take him into the men's bathroom? I want to know what you're going to do. And if you can't figure it out, guess what? You're not going to support people who have significant disabilities. I can tell you what Westside Regional Center, one of the things they did, they have a GPS locator system for provider agencies. Staff can take out their cell phone, and they have identified every companion bathroom within the geographic area of Westside Regional Center. Shows you exactly where it's at. You got to think outside of the box, guys. You got to figure this out. If you can't keep your mother-in-law out of your own business, you're not going to figure this out. I mean, if you're a good problem solver, I know it's not funny. You're probably a mother-in-law, but if you can't resolve your issues in your own life, how are you going to figure this out? In this instance, it's about problem solving. What changes will need to be made in the individual's individualized support plan. Here's another thing. Many agencies have written their program designs many years ago, and to transition is in total conflict with their program design. You need to go back and amend your program designs, guys, if you're going to transition. If anybody ever still pays attention, I don't know if Kern Regional Center even pays attention to program designs. Once they're in and it's 10 years later, who goes looks at this thing? I mean, maybe you do. But you want to go back. I would go back and change it just to support your effort and where you want to go with this. What modifications need to be made in the training curricula of DSPs and supervisors? DSPs are going to need, how do you deal now with someone who's going to have a seizure in an integrated setting? Different than how I deal with it in a facility-based setting where I have a room with a cot and I can take them there and they can rest. Will modifications need to be made to the organization's mission, vision, and values? What role do support recipients, DSPs, and families play in the transition? Does the buildings, if owned by the agency in which site-based services are provided, need to be repurposed or sold or leased? There are providers in this state who own millions of dollars of property that is used for day support. They are fighting tooth and nail against this. They have no way of paying their mortgage on those buildings as an owner if people leave those buildings. Are they going to tell you that's what they're doing? Are they going to say, well, the reason we're really against this is that I'm a property owner, and if I don't keep people in the property, I won't be able to have the income in order to pay the mortgage, and I'm going to lose the property? Is that what they're going to tell you? No. What they're going to do is they're going to try to invalidate the concept that we're talking about. Just listen to them, I promise. And we've got to take that rock and roll it over, call it what it is. Oh, and you hear this not just from for-profits, it's the not-for-profits too that own this property. The following operational issues need to be addressed when transitioning day support programs that is facility-based to one that is fully community-based. And we have this whole list of stuff here that we have to really think about. Locating and storing and changing individuals' disposable undergarments. Where are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Can you do it in a van in the back? Do you need to make a modification in the back where somebody can lie down and you can assist them? I mean, what are we going to do? This is really interesting. And come up here. I want you to read this to folks, okay? Because it's hard to see. If I just tell them, they're not going to believe me. This is a GIF. Okay, right? A thing that you bring down on PowerPoint. It's not a real toilet. This are two photographs, but I want you to tell them, this is a photograph that I have taken, and tell them what this says, could you?
Okay, the attendant of
What does this say?
Oh, men.
So it's a men's bathroom,
Correct.
right? Okay, and what does that say?
It says the attendant of the opposite sex may accompany a disabled person.
Okay, what kind of bathroom is this?
This is a women's bathroom.
Okay, and what does that say?
Attendant of the opposite sex may accompany disabled person.
So does that say that men can go into a woman's bathroom?
Yes.
Yes. You know where I took this? Those photos were taken on your interstates in California when you have those bathrooms when you get off the exits. That's what your bathrooms now look like. You're going to be seeing those all over. We've got to change how our system is working to accommodate. Boy, am I going to need, I've shared with some of you, I think before, my wife has FTA, frontal temporal lobe atrophy. It's a horrible disease. And she requires 24-hour support. She needs more and more assistance. And I know the day is not far off that I'm going to have to physically assist her in her toileting. This is a godsend for me. I mean, it truly is. I mean, what would I do if I'm out with her and you don't have that as an option? Locations for securely storing and administering medications. We have folks that are BID and TID, right? Twice a day and 3 times a day. Where are the medications going to go? How are you going to secure them? Where are they going to take them? Look, see, this has not been an issue. Why has this not been an issue? Come on, guys, come on. Why has this not been, when I'm bringing this up, why has this not been much of an issue?
Because they haven't left the facility.
That's exactly right. We're not promoting integration of people who have significant disabilities. There's been no issue. And now, hopefully, this is going to be an issue, and we're going to solve it. It's like putting the man on the moon. We're going to do it. No one's asking us to put a man on the moon. We're just being asked to how do you integrate people in the community setting. Location for maintaining food items at appropriate temperatures. Which means that people now, many folks bring their lunches to day programs and they have to have soup that goes into a microwave oven and they have knives and forks and their moms give them spaghetti and meatballs. You can't do that stuff. People that are out, well, you need sandwiches and things that people may need, for some people may need to be pureed when they bring it, but we're gonna have to rethink what people bring for lunch if you're gonna be in an integrated setting. Procedures to address vehicle breakdown accidents with individuals on board. Procedure to address seizures, other medical emergencies, procedures to continually monitor staff location and activities. Asterisks, the provider organization needs to know every single minute exactly where every participant is in the community setting and where their staff are, every minute. So if you do not have in place some type of GPS locator system, you are on the edge of an abyss. I'm an expert witness. I'll give you horror stories because the vast majority of the agencies have decided not to do that. They no more could tell me where that person is now. They're at the staff's house smoking grass. Guys, I'm not making this up. The provider agencies, for the most part, have decided they don't want to know where people are. They send them out in the morning and say, they're supposed to be over here. They're adopted the park. They're volunteering at the park. They're no more at the damn park in the Man in the Moon. So you better put something in place to know where these people are. It's going to catch up with you. Horror stories, procedures for developing schedules for volunteering, employment, and their distribution to all relevant stakeholders. We have an obligation to families that they need to be able to know where their sons and daughters are volunteering, where they're located. They don't need to know where they are in the moment. But schedules need to be on some kind of website. Families need to know where they're going to be, especially conservators and so forth. And here is the Achilles heel. I wish I had an answer for it. This is the one that just, I struggle with this. Procedures to immediately cover for staff who are no call, no show, or must leave during their shift due to illness or accident. I mean, with some agencies, what they'll do is they'll take two groups of people who are like in mobile work crews or volunteering as a group and bring them all together. I mean, that's the only thing that you can do. So instead of having 4 people here and 4 people here, they'll send out the message and they'll bring them all together and do 8 in order to try to cover. Or the supervisor will come and try to cover. But it is a tough question. It's not that big a deal in facility-based. I have a ratio of 1 to 3. Staff doesn't show, my ratio is 1 to 6. That's okay. I mean, I can make it in a facility-based environment. Procedures for securing the individual's record and inputting necessary documentation. What does that tell you? EMRs. Electronic medical records is what they're called. You need to be moving forward. Don't walk, run. Get them in place. I don't know how you can do an integrated kind of program of any kind unless you have an EMR. You can't have staff taking out paper records and 3-ring notebook binders and doing shift notes for Pete's sake. And we have so many of these systems, and they're so cheap now, where staff are doing all this stuff voice to text. They're doing their shift notes voice to text. You don't have to go like this anymore. And if you don't have it, speak up. That may not be in your controllable column to put it in place, but you have someone in your organization, if you're not electronic, put that in place because it's essential. And procedure for intervening, both therapeutic and protective oversight. Yeah, that's a tough one too. We have some people eating their tennis shoes and going from one room to another and not using doors. And it's one thing when that happens in a facility-based environment versus in an integrated setting, and how staff are going to deal with that type of conduct. Procedures for modifying activity location in response to inclement weather situations. I want you all to go home and say a prayer of thanks tonight. Do you realize what you would be dealing with if you were providers in Wisconsin, North Dakota? Do you understand what that means, Michigan? That you're going to have days of 10, 15 degrees below zero? Days and days and days? That you're going to have ice storms that are so bad that when you come out from wherever you were, you can't even open the doors to the vehicle? Around here, they throw you a damn earthquake once in a while. You don't even get them then. I mean, you don't even have anything here. I mean, I know it's hot outside. Big deal. But you guys are so lucky to make this happen because you got a climate that is conducive for people getting around, okay? It's horrible where I live. But the same policies, procedures, and expectations exist in all 50 states. You don't get off the hook because it's Wisconsin and you're on the Great Lakes. You still got to do it. So you need to appreciate how fortunate you are just from a climatic standpoint to put this in place. Procedures to identify and seek shelter in response to violent weather situations, tornadoes and earthquakes. So you need places such as churches. Many providers will make these relationships with churches and other places that they can go to when they have weather issues. Procedures for on-site supervision and training of direct support professionals. How I train staff now is going to be different.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't, because the staff do not have benefit. And this is another thing I didn't appreciate. I did not realize that for some staff who do not have the presence of a supervisor, it causes them anxiety. I don't have somebody to turn to when I have a question. I'm on my own. I got to figure this out. And I was not sensitive to that. I became sensitive to it. And so we need to help the staff with that emotional transition. There's not going to be somebody by your side, and there's not a colleague that you can turn to help bail you out and support you. Different kind of attitude, right? The issues to be addressed and their relevant importance are unique to each day program and each individual that is transitioning.